Welcome to our second Town Hall. We are the Batavia Counselors Collaboration, a group of mental health professionals that have gathered early in the pandemic and partnered with the Batavia Chamber of Commerce and BATV to explore ways we could help the community during this very challenging time. In today's Town Hall, we are going to use video clips from a 3-day production, C plus F equals Hope, created by the Batavia High School Productions Company in response to several events over the past year to help our panelists emphasize how to maneuver in our new normal. We are here socially distanced. Our panelists today are local counselor Maria Kuhn of Kuhn Counseling Services and Brian Rooney, clinical psychologist, and Stephanie Weber, the director of Suicide Prevention Services. I am your moderator, Margaret Perot, the president and CEO of the Batavia Chamber of Commerce. This last year was beyond anything any of us could have imagined. I'd like to take a moment to listen to the theater artists communicating their thoughts about the pandemic. About 6 months ago, we were trying to make some sense of the growing frustration and anxiety of the lockdown. What is the health of our community? How are we going to begin to restore what we seem to have lost?
I guess I'm just not used to this whole thing being the new normal.
Me too. It came so out of left field. And if I hear "in these confusing times" one more time, I'm gonna explode.
Me too. It feels like we're living through a U.S. history essay project. Oh, by the way, how'd your Starbucks interview go?
Oh, right, I actually got the job.
Oh, high five!
Trust me, I want a high five as much as you do. Oh, so, did you hear about that new movie that came out on Netflix? I guess they couldn't wait for theaters to reopen.
I have a Netflix subscription. You could come to my apartment and sleep over.
When this is all over.
Right, we'll do it eventually.
I'm so tired of talking in the future tense.
I'm just tired of thinking about the future. It makes me so nervous because I don't know what's gonna happen next.
Hey, do you remember that one time back in 10th grade when you were so tired that you fell out of your desk?
Yeah, and the concussion it gave me, it's been 6 years and my scalp still hurts.
Ah, the good old days, back when you could fall asleep in a physical classroom.
Do you remember when you were crushing on that one girl so hard that you shook up your soda so that it would explode and get her attention?
Yeah, not my finest moment.
I mean, it worked. You did get her attention because it exploded all over her shirt on picture day.
Oh, like I said, not my finest moment. Gosh, I used to be so cringy back then.
Used to be?
Hey.
Ha, I found the silver lining. You can't hit me. I just can't wait until we can do all of these things again.
Yeah. I'm gonna hit you so hard when this is over to make up for lost time.
I can't lie, I've missed getting hit on the arm whenever I make a stupid joke. I'm having to stretch my shoulder out to make the soreness go away.
It's the little things.
Yeah. Air hug?
Air hug.
These last 12 or 13 months, we've all been dealing with a variety of losses, uncertainties, unfamiliarities, fears, and surprises. The places we usually go, the people we usually hang around with, our families, our gatherings, our rituals, our inability to celebrate life's joys, our inability to get together and console ourselves with life's sorrows and deaths have all changed. Life is more deeply felt in person, and we've had to reckon with how do we deeply feel our lives, how do we continue to feel alive during these times when there have been so many restrictions. Even when we can reach out to others remotely via Zoom. There's a new term, I bet it'll be in the next dictionary, called Zoom fatigue. I've talked to friends and people who say, gee, it's great to talk to you, but since we last talked, nothing much has happened. I don't have much to say. So all of our landscape is different. And that doesn't mean worse, but it means different, and it's a challenge to our usual routines and being. A lot of feelings come up. A lot of feelings of stress have come up that we may not be as familiar with as we have been for the last several months. We have a lot on our plate, but also a lot of opportunity on our plate.
It has struck me that initially we had students losing the celebration of graduation. Suddenly the dead no longer had any kind of a celebration. And relationships were put on hold, whether it was in the workplace that we no longer went to, or school. And initially, I was looking at a study that was done on teens in quarantine, and in the spring quarter of last year, they seemed to think that the kids were positively impacted. It wasn't that big a deal, you know. They seemed to sleep a little more, but they seemed also to spend time with family. It was only as the first 2 or 3 months passed that began to have a strain. And suddenly children were isolating, and parents were isolating within their homes, and not spending as much time together. They were together because they were cocooned, but it not in a sense that was affirming or life-giving to members of the family. And teachers reported that the kids were more engaged, and the percentage of kids that they had lost, they might not have had even when they were in school. So that also had a positive effect. But when the summer came, and still no sports, still no theater, still no concerts, families sometimes isolated their families in vacation spots, but all in all, it was no place to go, no place to eat, no theater to watch. It was really beginning to take a toll. Nothing to do. Yeah. And then Kids Under Pressure in February of this year released a study, and the fall was a different year. Students, particularly females and students of color, found tasks and problems, found it very, very stressful. They were having trouble, like when the technology didn't work right, being uninvited to a class or negatively dinged for it. They no longer were handling the stresses that came with technology that had to lead, it had to facilitate the communication. In the absence of talking to people, I had more and more people say, even in their family life, they stopped talking. It's like they really began isolating. And so I think in the fall, we have seen a tremendous increase of students turning to this pandemic and saying it's become too stressful. And I think some of the I've wondered if some of the anger that we saw on the part of the adults, fighting masks, fighting testing, I mean, just one problem after another, fighting that their kids were not in school, although schools seem to have created, by the fall, a remarkable hybrid that seemed to be an appropriate solution to what we were trying to do.
Well, and you also had the fall leading up to holidays. And so now there's so much anxiety about, okay, our traditions are gone, the holidays are coming, how do we manage this whole thing? I found that students with IEPs were getting further and further behind. It was getting harder to contact the schools. No fault to the schools, because everybody was trying to get in touch with them and get things right. But when you looked at the impact from the littlest child all the way up to people in nursing homes, for example, and people that had loved ones in nursing homes, they couldn't see them. We couldn't touch people. Touch is so important, even put aside hugging. Handshaking, is that gone forever? Are we ever going to be able to put our hand on somebody? And yes, I've started hugging again now, but it was always this.
Well, the person on the bench talk about that, the one who's always punching the other, and yet she goes to do it again and she stops. And they go to high five about a funny story and they stop. And then they end their with that air hug. I mean, that was really very, 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 very challenging. I agree. I think the elderly, isolating them in nursing homes like we did, and never touching them. I had a family come in and they were talking about their mother, and they got to be in the same room for the first time in 12 months. And she looked at them in anger behind the mask. They could see she was upset. And so we were talking about, her son was not at all looking forward to the next visit. And I said, what I'm going to suggest you do is take a little oil, and you're going to have to keep your masks on and all that, but touch each other's hands. Put some oil on, touch her forehead, and put a little oil on there. And the son, who was reluctant, wasn't even going to go in. His wife and daughter said, we'll do it. Couldn't believe how much the difference that it made.
And the interaction of uncertainty, fear, and desire, even as we were talking earlier, as people are starting to get vaccinated. Okay, well, what's okay now? Is a gathering okay? Or, gee, are there supposed to be a certain number? But what does that number mean if some people are vaccinated? Oh, if I'm vaccinated, I really miss live music. Am I ready to go do that? So even as we move on, as things are looking like spots being a little brighter, there's still, for most people I know, that uncertainty of, yeah, I'd like that, but okay, let me see, let me just check it out, where we wouldn't give it a second thought 14 months ago. So again, even as things are getting brighter, we're still reckoning with some of this, as well as the residuals of, like Maria said, being isolated. Though there's some people who, I know a couple of people who've said, I'm doing fine. Mm-hmm. And that's good for them. And it'll be interesting to see how we all do our own re-entries as things start to roll.
And the effect is going to be with us. And that comes out in such a variety of different ways. But there was, this morning on NPR, the question was asked, will COVID always be with us? Will we always be concerned? And they kind of hedged around, it depends on this and it depends on that. And so as we're coming, like Brian said, we're coming out of it. I was with some people yesterday, and I'm a hugger. And now we ask, is it okay to hug? Have you been vaccinated? So I think, pieces of that change, and some of that fear remains with us and is still trying to work its way out.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a story of, when you were talking about kids, what they need. This little guy, he's 12 years old, and he was telling me that because he had an IEP, he was going to be able to go back into a small, and he said, I got to tell you, I'm not doing well out here. It doesn't work. I need my teacher, and I'm so glad I'm going back, even though his other members of his family were not. And I respond. My enthusiasm to that is that the school could respond to that. That was this fall as they found ways, as the months went on. I think we have to accept the fact that I don't think we're going to be living without some of these kind of viruses.
I don't either.
And so that some places, I think masks will have its place routinely in people's lives. And I think that's just how it's going to be in some settings,
Like we said, are we ever going to shake hands again? Who knows? We've been so indoctrinated right now, we don't know. Maybe there'll be another, like the hit on the arm. We don't know. And that's part of that uncertainty that hangs out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing that I realize is that with the distancing, shaking of hands, washing your hands, one of the things we realize is we did away with the flu season last year. Which is scary to think we weren't washing our hands before.
Right. But even going to the grocery store, you take the sanitizer, you take the wipe, and you think, well, I did anyway. Recently, I thought I could have gotten the flu this way before. I never would have thought of that.
And even in flu season, I don't know about others, but I never really gave it a thought other than I don't want to be around somebody who's sick. Period. But other than that, I wasn't walking around worrying about getting the flu. No. And that's why this is an entirely different animal that we need, and we are starting to really reckon with.
At one point someone referred to this as a war. And we have seen businesses fail. I mean, I drive around and I see stores gone. And we've seen tremendous community support on some things. But, knowing what it will be, I don't think we're going to be able to go back to the way it was.
No, I don't either. It'll be new, it'll be different, but there are gifts that will come out of this, and maybe this is one of them, as far as the washing and the masking, and no one is going to look back and say, oh, isn't this lovely that this happened and this is what we learned. But we are learning, like we talked about the flu, different ways to manage our lives and to manage out there with people we don't know. I had a young man tell me recently, and he has an IEP, he's 14, and he said, I was struggling in the fall, and he said, my mom did an IEP, we Zoomed, and then he goes like this, oh, I'm so tired of Zooming. He said, we Zoomed, I was part of the IEP, we got back to my tutor. He said, I'm going to school all day, then I have a tutor. Then I have my stepmom who works with me 2 hours at night on certain topics. But in between, his mother will say, go outside, run around the house. Even in the snow, go outside, run around the house. And he said, it made a difference, all of it. But the struggles, think of the hours, and we're still trying to keep up. Our kids are still trying to keep up. Yeah.
Recent studies are reporting a serious increase in depression and anxiety in all ages. The fear of loss seems intolerable. What do we do with the emotional toll?
Wow, what a powerful question. In fact, as things have gone on, it has become ever more challenging. And you know, as we mentioned earlier in the question, lives have changed. And as the girls talked about that uncertain, what will be the future, I think we have to look at the fact that some of our children, some of our adults, the stress has taken a toll and led to some rather serious anxiety and depression. And so beginning to find some ways to identify the stress, identify the anxiety, and kind of look into what do I have control over and what don't I have control, and beginning to look at what do I want my world to look like, you know?
And related to that, again, the old studies on stress say that it's best to look at it relative to stress and stressors. Stressors are what is out there or what we kind of create. Demands, challenges, stimuli. Stress is what we feel. Stress is our response to those demands. So relative to, as Maria said, what can we control and not control? We may not have a lot of control of some of the things going on out there, some of the restrictions, some of the realities. But the hope lies in that we do have some control and influence about being aware of and dealing with how we respond to what's going on. One example, I know this pandemic has really pointed out to me that I'm much more of an extrovert than I thought. I thought, oh, I can hang around. I know how to direct myself, structure my time, use my time well. But I began to literally feel a darker, heavier feeling not having contact with people. One of the things in my own personality is I tend to go, okay, just buck up, deal with it, be okay, keep moving. And what I needed to do is I needed to talk to people about how much I was missing people. And that didn't necessarily bring the people back, but it was a way to manage that stress that allowed me to not get heavier and darker. So the stress we feel can be related to, dealt with, but we may need to take a look at ourselves and maybe move a little out of our comfort zone in order to reckon with what we feel in response to all these stressors.
And I think, too, sharing is important, but we also have to remember the real world is going on out there as well. I mean, I have a friend whose husband has cancer. My husband is in declining health. I mean, things are continuing to happen, and yet, you know, we used to think we would just go to the hospital. Well, there's rules around that now, and who's allowed to go in. And I have a friend whose Signal, if she needed, we'd maybe talk once a week. But if she was in a dark place, and I don't mean suicide, just in a depressed, anxious spot, she would text me and say, I feel like I'm going over the edge. And that was just, call me right now. And then we just share back and forth. What was she going through? What could I see? And I would do the same to her. I think, you know, Brian makes such a valid point too. We're all experiencing similar things, but to find out what others are going through, you know, kind of camaraderie. And not isolating. Pull in some others, even if it is via Zoom. We're learning to talk on the telephone again. That is amazing. We're not just texting or Zooming. Hearing a voice makes such a big difference.
And one of the things I found out in getting out of my comfort zone is thinking, that's another little message, is I don't want to impose on people. Every time I called someone they seem genuinely glad to hear from me and genuinely glad to be able to talk to someone. So again, finding out a little thing about some of my own automatic beliefs and find, no, people want to connect, especially now. And one other thing related to that is the idea of grieving. We've had a lot of losses, material, routine, and even people through death or distance or lack of contact. And we are wired in our core to have a process called grieving when we experience a loss. It's part of how we're wired. We can see it. All animals do. If you've had a couple of dogs and one dog died, what's the other one like for a few weeks? And so that does go on with us. And there's plenty enough now in the literature and in common sense that when we're grieving, we're going to have certain feelings. There's going to be sadness, there's going to be depression, there's going to be anger. There's going to be a little more acceptance, and then we'll cycle back through those feelings. But the processing those feelings includes our own awareness, our own compassion, and having contact with people, even if it's by phone or by Zoom or across the yard to the neighbor. And the grieving is real, and it can be insidious. It can be like, after a while, gee, I just feel a little less jump in my step than I even did a week ago. Well, maybe there's some things that just need to be thought about, talked about, felt about, because that process moves grieving along.
And sometimes you have to sit in that grief, maybe journal about that grief. As you say, reach out to someone. We have small griefs all the time. If we're in a minor car accident, you go through the shock, the anger, the denial, the bargaining, acceptance, and then that builds upon itself. And if you, like Brian said, if you don't release that, even the part crying, when people apologize for crying, that just absolutely drives me crazy. Tears are therapeutic. We need to cry. Our bodies need to let go of that. I learned from a study from a long time ago that you cannot, try this, cry longer than 10 minutes without taking a breath and starting over. Not that you're breathless. Yeah. So you're crying and is not going, it's going to release things. Yes. It's one of the best things that we can do for ourselves. So, yes.
You know, I have met a woman who, in the summer of last year, lost her father. And he died at home, and they were with him. And what really struck me is how well she handled that, and she spoke of it well, you know. And then about 2 months ago, her dog was very sick. And this worried me, where I didn't see tears with her dad. And you know, everyone experiences grief differently. I could see it was breaking her. And she was still hopeful. Well, in the end, you know, and even there, I've seen it, but I didn't process it, that you go to see a vet, only the dog goes in.
Yes.
Or the animal, okay? And this vet, at the end of this dog's life, didn't enforce that at all, had her there. And when she came to see me, it was after she had died. She showed me what she'd begun to do, and she'd begun to create a memory wall. Mm-hmm. And she was still crying talking about this dog. This dog she'd rescued this dog. Mm-hmm. And she herself is a survivor of cancer, so this was a very important person in her life, I think, as animals can be. But one that she caught, that she captured, I asked her for, and I'm going to share it with you. If there ever comes a day when we can't be together, keep me in your heart. I'll stay there forever. Winnie the Pooh. And I think that in processing our losses, even this pandemic, we really have to think about what's been special, owning that. You know, I was, as I've shared with you, very moved with the actors, the creation of these shorts that these kids did last year, because it taught me something about the experience that we are going through, and I'm grateful for the artists, you know, and I long for the time where we won't see them on Zoom, where we'll see them and see the power of that space brings in terms of how we deal with loss.
Yes.
What are some of the suggestions you guys have about how people can deal with the stress that they've gotten very private with, or the depression that they're not talking about?
Some of the standards as far as exercising and trying to eat healthy and drink water, and like, you know, the little boy that had to run around the house, even inside, just getting some movement. And like I said earlier, sometimes you sit with it, you journal it. I think it's getting up off the couch and not staring at the TV, reaching out to someone else, and trying to do things that are more healthy. Maybe I say about myself, get out of your head. Quit taking, like you were saying, Brian, you realize you're more of an extrovert. And just things can build up and build up. You know, I've said over the years too, you can change your brain waves by taking a pen and moving it from one hand to the other and clicking it. My dad used to say when we were growing up, I had an older sister, don't just sit there, do something. And that's kind of what my clients and I have been talking about. You can sit with a little bit, put a timer on, but then do something. Open a window, take some fresh air, go for a ride, listen to some nice music that you enjoy. One of my clients says she turned up her headbanging music so loud that her landlord said, could you keep it at a level where the rest of us can live in the building? So she would go in her car and do that.
And one of the tough things is if we are feeling a little ground down by these last months and feeling lower energy, it's a real challenge to get up off the couch. And to have a part of us that isn't just fully involved in that more down, stuck feeling, but a part of us that's the observer, that's our compassionate friend part of us, and go, I know you're feeling crappy, just get up. Just get up and move. Or you were going to call that person, call. And so to acknowledge this is a drag, and I can make this less of a drag if I just have that transition into, like, just do something. And that's simple, but it's not easy. No. But it's really worth the challenge, because the alternative is you sink deeper, get more stuck, and feel all this stuff we've been talking about more and worse, which doesn't lead you to the yellow brick road.
You know, I was struck with, in December, it was an increase in people giving birth. And by December, there aren't enough rescue dogs to be in homes, okay? And having recently fallen to the get a dog and having a puppy, one of the things that I realized the gift of it is in our isolation, in our being careful, new birth and animals that are with us, they quiet our lives. Yes. They distract us. They entertain us. Nobody thinks twice about touching a baby, you know, in our safe circle. Dogs don't think twice. They're not worried about the pandemic. And so there's finally somebody giving back to us unconditionally. Yes. And it is the way that we can begin to come out of this.
And we're coming into spring. We're in spring, which always is new life, new flowers. I am so excited. I walk around my garden outside. I'm a gardener. And just, it's like every day I'm like, oh, I think that one's going to be open tomorrow. We can get out more. And I think that was another part of the darkness. Well, it was dark. We were in winter. Sometimes I would say to myself, it feels like you're in the winter of your soul. Well, I think in many ways we were, and we're coming out of it, and things look better. But Brian, I think you said earlier too, the difference between stress and stressors. What can we do? What are we able to do? Which is, yeah, you can't get dogs, they're gone.
No.
That's a good thing for the dog, and it's a good thing for the people.
Yeah.
And some of the action we can take as best we can, some of the things we stumble on that are kind of surprises that we can get into. But along with that is to be aware of the stories and the narratives we're operating on, possibly in response to the stressors. It's not hard through all this. I even heard myself saying, another thing, more, again, still, and I can even feel as I say those words in my body starts going down. And I don't want a narrative that's a big fairy tale and seashells and balloons, but there are narratives we can operate on that are accurate, that also hold more hope and possibility. Like, even if we're not feeling them at the time, there are gifts in this, I just want to pay attention. That's different than, God, this sucks. It creates different feelings in us. So one of the things to really be aware of is what kind of stories are driving us and are we operating on? And can we edit our stories if we want to feel a little more possibility, hope, connection, aliveness within us? And that, again, relatively simple but not easy, because a lot of the stories we operate on are pretty automatic.
And as we've developed some new traditions, I think there comes a point where we want to think about, oh good, it's over, now I want to run back into my routine. That would be a missed moment, because I think that we saw the lives of other people decimated by this pandemic. 500,000 people is a lot of people and a lot of families. So what did we learn about ourselves? What did we learn about our families? What did we maybe come to enjoy that we never had? I think my experience of here in the Midwestern families with children from little to high school is it's easy for those families, those parents just lose each other. One or both run off to jobs, kids run off to activities. They don't know each other. And one of the gifts, I think, is we've come back home, and maybe we have an opportunity here to take the gift of knowing each other in this moment of history in a way we never would have had. You know. Years ago when I took a job in Naperville, one of the things I discovered about the children at that moment is they go to school and they usually go to 1.2 activities. And they literally have groups of people who drive them from one thing to the other, or the bus drops them off at the next activity. And I realize for many children, they aren't home until 6, 7 o'clock at night.
They are now.
They are now, exactly. And so there may be some really talking not only as individuals, but as families. And even those of us there are some who I think miss the water cooler conversation at work, but then there are some that think, wow, I'm just as productive, if not more productive. And for me, it's more stressful. I enjoy my job more than I ever have before. And so, maybe individuals even rethinking how they're going to go forward will be kind of important to lift us out of some of the stress and anxiety that has been a product of this extremely distracted time, turbulent time.
My name is Jenny Foster, and I had the worst year of my life. My business was failing and I couldn't swim through the debt. I wanted to give up and let it all fall apart. But I didn't. And it didn't. Everything stayed together because I believed in a better future. I was a very important person, at least in my own mind. I let others fight pointless battles because I thought my perspective was the only perspective. But I was wrong. I know it sounds cliche, but take a moment to walk in someone else's shoes. I was supposed to be a mother. That's what I expected. To become a wife, a mother, and that's my life. But that's not actually how it happened. I couldn't have children, and I was excluded from the only community I knew. But I found happiness in my husband and the other people I loved. You can't only rely on one source of light, because there's always going to be another just around the corner.
My name was John Doe, and I didn't get a second chance at life. So, here's some advice. Listen, learn, be kind. Make those around you a little bit happier, and I guarantee you, you'll find yourself in a much better position.
My name was Charlotte Alexander Green, and I planted a tree. That tree, actually. It may not seem like much, but look at all the trees here now. It just took one person and others followed. Don't be afraid to take action. Courage in the face of fear is the only way change can be made. Have courage. Have hope.
As more adults are being vaccinated, schools are bringing students back in full time, and the community will be coming out of isolation. It looks like some things are getting back to normal. But even as things are opening up, with some restrictions still in place, what do you think our community can actually hope for in our newest normal? How can we take charge?
Courage. Fear. Hope. All three are intertwined. They all influence each other. In these times of uncertainty, as in any time of uncertainty, we doubt. We doubt ourselves, those around us, and the possibility of getting better, but courage and fear light the candle that is hope.
Well, I know that we've talked already about some of these things that we can do physically and emotionally and how things are changing in this world. I said earlier, we're coming into spring. That will certainly help. We're coming out of our bubbles maybe a little bit and moving into other bubbles where our talk is different, I believe. Our talk is different. Like I said, may I get a hug? I have clients coming in now who they choose whether they keep their mask on or they take their mask off during the session. That's part of the newness. But I'm noticing more and more are saying, well, I'm comfortable if you are. Brian said it too, it's what's within our control and hope. You know, I'm in a field of suicide prevention. That's, when you take your life, that's the end of all hope. That dark tunnel has closed. And I believe that as long as we, as human beings, have hope, we see things getting better. We're going to begin, our spirits are going to rise up a little bit more. We're still going to be cautious, but more things now come into our control. Kids can decide. I've had a 14-year-old say, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back. I want to wait until next fall. I'll keep up with my studies. I'll do what I need to do. But I'm afraid to go back. Okay, that's a choice that he gets to make. Whereas when all this started and all schools were closed, that was quite a mess in the beginning when everyone was trying to figure it out. And I think at each stage we've been guided. We still make individual choices. Well, the question is, what is within our power?
And I think in terms of like thoughtful courage to be assessing what do we want, what are we desiring, what's the situation, can I do what I want, can I get near who I want to be with in some kind of ways that doesn't endanger me or them. And to have that thoughtful courage going all the time, so that's one of the ways that I know I think it helps with our different moving out of our comfort zones for our own well-being. So the idea of being thoughtful, sizing things up, not letting our fear hijack us, but inform us, I think that's at least a decent concept or theme in moving forward.
And hope has to be based on a reality factor. You used a great expression before. I was thinking unicorns and balloons and candy and stuff like that. You know, I can hope very unrealistic things. You know, I'm going to get on a plane and go to Disney World and all the crowd's going to be there and everything's going to be normal. No, that's not based on the reality of what is happening today. I can go buy myself a unicorn. I can be with a group of friends. We can have some fun together. We can hope that things will keep getting better, and I think that they are, but we do have to be realistic about that too. And expand, I like you say, getting out of your comfort zone, but being realistic. Have hope. We see it. But be realistic about what's down the road. Not depressed, not anxious necessarily. It's based on a reality factor. What is it that I'm looking forward to? And it's starting. It's starting. I had a classmate die of COVID this year, and she was like a central part of a little group of us that would get together a couple times a month. And people were just stunned because she was so careful. And I know we referenced this earlier, but there was no funeral. There was no recognition. The family said, we're going to wait until the spring. So then, not being able to get together, having someone die, we began to say, okay, where is the hope in this? Well, the hope is here. We will recognize her. The hope is remembering her as she was. And the hope is that one day maybe we can get together and not sit outside with our coats on in November or December, but actually be inside and have some kind of normalcy. So be realistic with the hope, but have hope.
You know, the one thing the pandemic has done is it's taught us to do something totally different. And I look at churches, you know, that are now sacred spaces that are beginning to get a few people in. But I was talking to a youth minister a couple weeks back, and I said, as churches are beginning to open, are you finding less people in the Zooms, in the streamings? And he goes, we have watched something happen that we don't quite know what to do with, and the fine folks of this church actually reflected the same thing. There are more people on Zoom and streaming than are actually parishioners in the church. And as people come back, they don't see that number going down, because maybe in our new reality, not everyone will come to the space. You know, for the people who feel much better to worship in their home, to the student who feels much better to learn at home. You know, suddenly now we have opened a door to possibilities and I think that's one of the positives of this pandemic, that we never thought about before. And I think that that will have an effect, which is why I think people need to begin to own the story. What has this been to you? How is this changing your life? And not just, the governor says I can take my mask off. I do it, you know? No. Think about the world you're going into. Think about what you're comfortable with. Don't ignore yourself, you know? Own the experience. There's this marvelous, and I'm not going to do it justice, but Little House on the Prairie. And there was this dialogue where his wife was trying to encourage him to come to the church service because the children were going to be baptized in the Spirit that day, okay? And he says, he has this long conversation with her saying, no, I don't find my God there. It doesn't work for me. And she goes, but it's the children. And he goes, I understand that. And she said, well, where do you find hope? Or, you know, he goes, when I go to the mountain, when I hear the wind, I find hope, I find meaning in my life. And so as life got stopped and all our routines got stopped, we have a moment here, I think, to really seize and reflect on what we're going to do going forward. You know, I bet people actually read a book. Not on the electrical, but actually held a book in your hand.
I was heartbroken when the libraries closed.
Yeah.
That was, I could just walk into the library and feel at peace and at home and take all the time in the world to get the books, and that really hit me hard. And then at one point I thought, okay, I know I like holding a book, a real book. I bought some books because I thought, well, I'm helping the economy by doing that. And then I began to trade with my friends, and it was good.
And for many of us who, as the pandemic started, to go, okay, I guess this will give me an opportunity to read some books. There's a project at home or this thing I want to do. And if you got to it, great. And if you didn't get to it, I hope you can forgive yourself and have some understanding of why or how that happened, but that was maybe a taller task than we thought, given the other kinds of things about our anxieties and about the heaviness and the aloneness and some of the grieving. So if you didn't get to all those books and projects, I hope you can forgive yourself.
I needed to hear that, Brian. Thank you, because I've had one laying there for 18 months, and I look at it and go, yeah, I really don't think I'm ever going to do that. Yeah.
You know, the students captured in the graveyard scene what this pandemic has been. We have a choice to redefine our lives or really think about it again and to decide what we're going to do next.
Thanks to each of you for providing some amazing insight and strategies that can be used by any one of us to help us to get through these continually changing, confusing, and stressful times. A special thank you goes to BATV to providing your recording skills and time, and to the Batavia High School Productions Company for your amazing work in the C+F = Hope. A special thank you to Batavia Covenant Church for allowing us to use their facility. We'd like to end this town hall with one more clip by the production group that we hope will provide some inspiring words for all to remember on those tough days.
Take chances, make mistakes, get messy, Miss Frizzle.
Train yourself to let go of everything you fear to lose. Jedi Master Yoda.
How far that little candle throws its beams, so shines a good deed in a naughty world.
If you have knowledge, let others light their candle at it. Margaret Fuller.
It's okay to lose to an opponent, but it's never okay to lose to fear. Mr. Miyagi.
Hope is being able to see all of the light despite all of the darkness. Desmond Tutu.
What we call despair is often only the painful eagerness of unfed hope. George Eliot.
Wisdom holds a candle to experience.
but you've got to take that candle and walk alone. Lauren Kate.
We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Martin Luther King Jr.
When you're at the end of your rope, tie a knot and hold on. Theodore Roosevelt.
A good person is like a candle. They burn themselves up to give others light.
In time, a new hope will emerge. Obi-Wan Kenobi.
It's not about how much we've lost. It's about how much we have left. Tony Stark. Hope is the only bee that makes honey without flowers. Robert Greene Ingersoll.
Nothing can dim the light that comes from within. Maya Angelou.